It was past midnight when Keanu finally stepped out of the studio. The film shoot had run longer than expected, and he was exhausted. The Los Angeles streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by under the orange glow of the streetlights. He pulled his jacket tighter against the cool night air and looked around for his ride. Right on time, like always, the black sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the back door with a warm smile. His name was Robert, and he'd been driving Keanu around for the past 3 months. There was something Keanu appreciated about him. He wasn't pushy or overly talkative like some drivers who tried too hard to make conversation with celebrities. Robert was just genuine. "Long night, Mr. Reeves?" Robert asked as Keanu settled into the back seat. "You could say that," Keanu replied with a tired smile. "How about you? You must be tired too, waiting all this time." Robert shook his head as he got back into the driver's seat. "I'm used to it. Part of the job." But even in the dim light, Keanu noticed something different about him tonight. Robert looked worn down in a way he hadn't seen before. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually neat shirt looked a bit wrinkled. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city lights streaming past the windows. Keanu found himself studying Robert's reflection in the rearview mirror. The man had to be in his early 50s, maybe older. He always kept the car spotlessly clean, always arrived early, and always had this quiet dignity about him that Keanu respected. "Robert," Keanu said, breaking the silence, "you doing okay? You look like you could use some rest." Robert's eyes met his in the mirror for a brief moment before looking back at the road. "I'm fine, thank you for asking. Just been a busy week, that's all." "How's your family doing?" Keanu asked, genuinely curious. In all their drives together, Robert had never really talked much about his personal life. There was a pause, longer than what felt natural. They're good," Robert finally said, but something in his voice didn't sound convincing. "I'm actually between places right now. You know how it is, looking for the right spot." Keanu nodded, but something about the answer bothered him. It was too vague, too careful. He'd been around enough people in his life to know when someone was holding something back. But he didn't push. Everyone had a right to their privacy. They pulled up to Keanu's house about 20 minutes later. "Thanks for the ride, Robert," Keanu said as he got out. "Get some rest, okay?" "Will do, Mr. Reeves. Have a good night." Keanu walked toward his front door, fishing for his keys. He heard the car engine still running behind him and turned around, expecting to see Robert pulling away. But the car just sat there idling at the curb. That was strange. Usually, Robert would drive off right away. Keanu unlocked his door but didn't go inside. Instead, he stayed in the doorway watching. Something told him to wait to see what was happening. Maybe it was just curiosity, or maybe it was that nagging feeling that something wasn't right. After a few minutes, the car's headlights turned off, but the car didn't move. Keanu's brow furrowed. Why would Robert just sit there in the dark? Was he making a phone call? Was he waiting for another pickup? 5 more minutes passed, then 10. The car remained parked under the streetlight about 50 yards from Keanu's house. Now Keanu was really curious and a little concerned. He stepped back outside and walked along the sidewalk, staying in the shadows where Robert wouldn't easily spot him. As he got closer, he could see into the car more clearly. What he saw made his chest tighten. Robert had reclined the driver's seat back as far as it would go. He was reaching into the back seat, pulling out what looked like a blanket. An old worn blanket that had seen better days. Keanu stopped walking. He stood there in the darkness, watching as Robert arranged the blanket over himself, trying to get comfortable in the cramped front seat. Then Robert pulled out a small pillow, the kind you might find at a discount store, and tucked it behind his head. The realization hit Keanu like a punch to the gut. Robert wasn't waiting for another ride. He wasn't making phone calls or taking a break. Robert was settling in for the night. He was going to sleep in his car. He'd been sleeping in his car, probably for a while now. Keanu felt his throat tighten. All those times Robert had driven him around Los Angeles, from fancy restaurants to movie premieres, from his home to the studio, the man had been homeless, living in the very car he used for work. And Keanu had never known. No one had known, because Robert had never said a word. He'd never complained, never asked for help, never showed any sign that he was struggling. Keanu watched as Robert adjusted the blanket one more time, trying to cover himself completely. Even from a distance, Keanu could see how the man tried to make himself as small as possible in the seat. trying to find some comfort where there wasn't much to be found. How long had this been going on? How many cold nights had Robert spent in that car? How did he shower? Where did he eat? How did he manage to show up every single day looking presentable, acting professional, smiling like everything was fine? Keanu stood there for what felt like forever, his mind racing. He thought about all their conversations over the past 3 months. Robert always asked about Keanu's day, always made sure the temperature in the car was comfortable, always had a bottle of water ready. He was thoughtful, kind, and hardworking, and he was sleeping in his car. The pride it must take, Keanu thought, to keep going like this, to maintain your dignity when life has knocked you down so hard. Robert could have mentioned his situation, could have hinted at it, could have asked for help. But he hadn't. He just kept showing up, doing his job, treating everyone with respect. Keanu finally turned and walked back to his house, but he knew he wouldn't sleep that night. His mind was already working, already thinking. He couldn't just ignore what he'd seen. He couldn't pretend he didn't know. But he also knew that approaching this the wrong way could hurt Robert's pride, could make things worse instead of better. As Keanu lay in his comfortable bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he thought about Robert trying to sleep in a car seat under a streetlight. He thought about how unfair life could be, how someone could work so hard and still struggle so much. And he thought about what he could do to help, really help, without making Robert feel like he was being pitied. By the time the sun started to rise, Keanu hadn't slept at all. But he had the beginning of an idea. He didn't know exactly how it would work yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Robert spend another night in that car if he could help it. Not when he had the means to do something about it. Not when he'd just witnessed the kind of quiet strength and dignity that deserved so much better. The question was how to help someone who was too proud to ask for it. The next morning, Keanu sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He hadn't touched it. His mind was still on what he'd seen the night before. Robert sleeping in his car. The image wouldn't leave him alone. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for the driving service company. He'd used them for years and they'd always been reliable. But now he wanted to know more. He wanted to understand. "Good morning. This is Elite Drive Services," a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Keanu Reeves. I'm calling about one of your drivers, Robert Chen." "Oh, Mr. Reeves. Of course, is everything all right? Did something happen?" No, nothing like that," Keanu said quickly. "Actually, Robert has been excellent. I just wanted to commend him. He's been my regular driver for a few months now, and I've been really impressed." There was a pause on the other end. Then the woman's voice brightened. "That's so kind of you to say. Robert is actually one of our very best. He's been with us for almost 2 years now, and he's never missed a single shift. Never late, never a complaint from any client. He's really special." 2 years, Keanu repeated, his mind working. "That's impressive dedication. It really is. Honestly, we wish all our drivers were like him. He treats this job like it's the most important thing in the world." Because maybe it is, Keanu thought. Maybe it's the only thing keeping him going. After he hung up, Keanu sat back in his chair. 2 years with the company, never missing a shift. How long had Robert been homeless during that time? And more importantly, how had he ended up in this situation? Over the next few days, Keanu made it his mission to learn more, but carefully. He didn't want to pry or make Robert uncomfortable. Instead, he started asking casual questions during their drives. Where did Robert grow up? What did he do before driving? It was like putting together a puzzle, one small piece at a time. Robert had been a music teacher. He'd taught middle school for 15 years, helping kids discover their love for instruments and melody. You could hear the passion in his voice when he talked about it, the way his whole face lit up at the memories. "Why did you stop teaching?" Keanu asked one afternoon as they sat in traffic. Robert's smile faded a little. "Budget cuts. They eliminated the entire music program. Happened to a lot of schools around the same time." He shrugged, trying to seem casual about it. "I tried to find another teaching position, but there weren't many openings. And when there were, well, schools wanted younger teachers, cheaper ones. That must have been hard," Keanu said quietly. "It was what it was," Robert replied. But Keanu could hear the pain underneath those words. Another day, during another drive, Robert mentioned his wife, Linda. They'd been married for 28 years. Keanu noticed how Robert's voice got softer when he talked about her, how he smiled at the memories. "She sounds wonderful," Keanu said. "She was," Robert said, and that one word "was" carried so much weight. Keanu didn't push, but over time the story came out in fragments. Linda had gotten sick 3 years ago. Cancer. They'd fought it together, tried everything. Robert had used all their savings paying for treatments, for doctors, for anything that might help. But in the end she'd passed away. "I'm so sorry," Keanu said, and he meant it. Robert nodded, his eyes on the road. "Me too. Every single day." The medical bills had wiped them out completely. Then, without a steady job and with his savings gone, Robert couldn't keep up with rent. He'd moved to a smaller place, then an even smaller one. And then, 8 months ago, even that became too much. "I stayed with a friend for a while," Robert said during one conversation, not realizing he was telling Keanu about his homelessness without explicitly saying it. "But I couldn't impose on them forever, so I figured I'd make do until I saved enough to get back on my feet." Make do meant sleeping in his car. It meant keeping up appearances while falling apart inside. It meant working every shift he could get, saving every dollar, hoping that somehow it would be enough to climb out of the hole he'd fallen into. Keanu learned that Robert would park in different spots each night, always somewhere with a streetlight for safety. He'd wake up at 5 in the morning and drive to a 24-hour gym where he had a basic membership. That's where he showered and got ready for the day. His clothes were kept neat in a hanging bag in his backseat. He ate cheaply, mostly fast food dollar menu items or whatever he could grab from convenience stores. And through all of this, he kept showing up, kept smiling, kept treating every passenger with kindness and respect. One evening, Keanu asked Robert about his dreams, what he wanted for the future. Robert was quiet for a long moment. "I'd like to teach again," he finally said. "I miss it. Miss seeing kids' faces when they finally get a piece of music right, when they realize they can create something beautiful." He laughed, a little embarrassed. "Probably sounds silly." "It doesn't sound silly at all," Keanu said. "It sounds like you were really good at what you did." "I tried to be. And if you could have anything else?" "What would you want?" Robert thought about it as they drove through the evening traffic. "A place to live," he said simply. "Nothing fancy, just somewhere stable, somewhere I could call home, maybe with a small room where I could set up a keyboard, practice a bit." He smiled sadly. "Small dreams, I guess." "Not small," Keanu said. "Important. There's a difference." What struck Keanu most was that through everything, Robert never complained. He never made excuses. He never asked for anything. When he talked about his situation, it was always matter of fact, always with this acceptance that this was just how things were for now. But Keanu also noticed the toll it was taking. Some mornings, Robert looked more tired than others. Sometimes his hands would shake slightly on the steering wheel. Once, Keanu saw him wince when he got out of the car, his back clearly aching from too many nights in an uncomfortable position. "You okay?" Keanu had asked. "Just a little stiff," Robert had said with a smile. "Getting old, you know." But it wasn't just age. It was the weight of everything he was carrying. The grief, the loss, the daily struggle to survive while maintaining his dignity. And still he kept going. Keanu found himself thinking about Robert constantly. At home, at work, during meetings. He'd be sitting in a comfortable chair and think about Robert sleeping in his car. He'd eat a nice meal and think about Robert counting dollars to see if he could afford something hot for dinner. It wasn't fair. That was what kept running through Keanu's mind. It just wasn't fair. Here was a good man, a man who'd spent his life teaching kids, who'd given everything to try to save his wife, who worked harder than most people Keanu knew, and he was sleeping in his car. Keanu had enough money to buy 100 cars. He lived in a house with more rooms than he needed. He could easily write a check that would solve Robert's problems immediately. But he knew it wasn't that simple. Robert had pride. He had dignity, and Keanu understood, respected even, that just handing him money could feel like charity in a way that might hurt more than help. He needed a different approach. Something that would help Robert without making him feel like he was being pitied. Something that would give him back his dignity along with a roof over his head. Late one night, Keanu started making calls. He reached out to friends, colleagues, people he trusted. He explained the situation carefully without giving away too many details at first. He wanted to help his driver, he told them. A good man who'd fallen on hard times through no fault of his own. The response surprised him. Almost everyone he talked to wanted to help. They'd all known someone like Robert, or they'd been through hard times themselves. One friend offered to help find an apartment. Another mentioned a music program that was looking for instructors. Someone else wanted to contribute money toward getting Robert back on his feet. It reminded Keanu that there were still good people in the world. People who understood that sometimes life knocked you down, and that didn't mean you deserved to stay down. As the pieces started coming together, Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not for himself, but for Robert. Hope that they could turn this around. Hope that a good man could catch a break. He just needed to figure out exactly how to make it happen in a way that Robert would accept. Because knowing Robert, that was going to be the hardest part of all. Keanu knew he needed a plan. A real one. Something that would help Robert without making him feel like he was accepting charity. Because if there was one thing Keanu had learned about Robert over these months, it was that the man had his pride. And that pride had probably been one of the few things keeping him going through all of this. He sat down one evening with a notebook and started writing. Not a script, not a story, but a strategy. How do you help someone who won't ask for help? The answer came to him around 2 a.m. You don't just give them something. You give them an opportunity. You make it feel earned, not handed over. You make it about what they can do for you, not what you're doing for them. The next morning, Keanu called the driving service again. This time, he had a specific request. I'm working on a personal project, he told the manager. A documentary-style piece about Los Angeles, the real city that people don't always see. I need a driver who knows the area well, someone reliable who can commit to several weeks of extended drives. And I specifically want Robert. That sounds wonderful, Mr. Reeves. I'm sure Robert would be honored. There's one more thing, Keanu added. Because this is a longer commitment and irregular hours, I'll be paying a premium rate. Significantly higher than the standard fee. He could hear the surprise in the manager's voice. That's very generous of you. Robert's been excellent, and I want to make sure he's properly compensated for his time. What Keanu didn't say was that the extra money would be going directly to Robert. Enough to make a real difference. Enough to help him get back on his feet. But that was only the first step. Next, Keanu called his friend Daniel, who worked in real estate. I need you to help me find an apartment, Keanu said. Something modest but nice. 1 bedroom, decent neighborhood, close to public transportation. And I need it furnished. For you? Daniel asked, confused. For a friend. Someone who needs a fresh start? Daniel didn't ask questions. They'd known each other long enough that he understood when Keanu was serious about something. Give me a few days. I'll find something good. Then came the harder part. Keanu needed to find Robert a way back to teaching. That wouldn't be as easy as finding an apartment. He started making calls to community centers, music schools, after-school programs. He didn't use his name at first, just asked if they had any openings for music instructors. Most places said no. Budget cuts had hit everyone. Music programs were often the first to go. But Keanu kept calling. Finally, he reached a community center in a working-class neighborhood. The director, a woman named Patricia, listened as Keanu explained what he was looking for. I actually do need someone, she said carefully. We have a small music program, mostly for kids who can't afford private lessons. But I can't pay much. It would only be part-time. That's okay, Keanu said. What matters is that it's a real opportunity. Can I ask why you're doing this? You sound like you're going to a lot of trouble for someone. Keanu thought about how to answer. Because sometimes good people need a break, he finally said. And because everyone deserves a second chance. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Tell me about this person, so Keanu did. He told her about Robert's background, his years of teaching, his dedication, his situation. He didn't mention the homelessness directly, but he made it clear that Robert had been through hard times. Can he come in for an interview? Patricia asked. He doesn't know about this yet, Keanu admitted. I'm still figuring out how to approach it. Well, when you do, tell him to call me. Anyone you vouch for this strongly is worth meeting. Over the next week, Keanu reached out to more people. A few colleagues contributed money when they heard what he was trying to do. One friend worked at a furniture store and offered to donate some items for the apartment. Another knew someone who ran a food bank and could help with getting Robert stocked up on groceries. It was amazing, really. Once Keanu started talking about it, so many people wanted to help. Everyone had their own story about someone they'd known who'd fallen on hard times. Everyone understood that circumstances could change in an instant, that life could knock anyone down. "How's he doing?" people would ask. "This driver of yours?" "He's surviving," Keanu would answer. "But he deserves better than just surviving," Daniel called back after a few days. "I found something," he said. "Small, complex, quiet neighborhood. 1 bedroom, recently renovated. The landlord's willing to work with us on the deposit." "Perfect. Set it up." "Keanu, I have to ask, how much are you putting into this?" Keanu thought about it. The apartment rent for 6 months, the furniture, the job connections, the extra pay for the driving work. It added up. But then he thought about Robert sleeping in his car, about a man who'd lost everything but still showed up every day with a smile. "However much it takes," he said simply. Now came the hardest part, actually telling Robert. Keanu spent days thinking about how to approach it. He couldn't just say, "Hey, I know you're homeless, and I fixed everything." That would crush Robert's spirit, make him feel exposed and pitied. He needed Robert to feel like he was earning it, like this was an opportunity based on merit, not charity, even though deep down Keanu knew it was both. One evening, after Robert picked him up from the studio, Keanu made his move. "Robert, I want to talk to you about something," he said as they drove. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, what's on your mind?" "I'm working on a project. A personal one, sort of a documentary about Los Angeles, exploring different neighborhoods and communities. I need a driver who can commit to it for the next several weeks, someone who knows the city well." Robert glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "That sounds interesting. I want you to be that driver," Keanu continued. "But I have to be honest, it's going to be irregular hours, longer days sometimes. That's why I'm offering a significantly higher rate than what you normally make." He could see Robert's expression change, a mix of surprise and something else. Hope, maybe. "I appreciate that, Mr. Reeves, but why me specifically?" "Because you're reliable, because you're professional, and because I trust you." All of which was true. "What do you say?" Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Can I ask how much higher the rate would be?" Keanu named a figure that made Robert's eyes widen in the mirror. That's very generous," Robert said, his voice a little shaky. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "You've earned it. So are you in?" "Yes," Robert said quickly. "Absolutely yes." "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. You have no idea what this means." But Keanu did know. He knew exactly what it meant. It meant hope for a deposit on an apartment. Hope for getting out of that car. Hope for a future that didn't involve parking under streetlights every night. "Great," Keanu said, trying to keep his voice casual. "We'll start next week. I'll have a more detailed schedule for you soon." As Robert drove, Keanu could see his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter, could see him sitting up a bit straighter. It was like watching someone remember what it felt like to have something to look forward to. That night, after Robert dropped him off, Keanu didn't watch him park down the street. He didn't need to, because he knew that soon, very soon, Robert wouldn't be sleeping in that car anymore. But first, he had to coordinate everything. The apartment had to be ready. The furniture had to be delivered. The job opportunity had to be lined up. Everything had to come together perfectly. Keanu spent the next few days like a general planning a campaign. He coordinated with Daniel about the apartment. He made sure Patricia at the community center was ready. He gathered the contributions from friends and organized everything. And through it all, Robert kept driving him around, unaware that his life was about to change completely. Keanu would catch himself smiling sometimes, thinking about what was coming. It was like planning the best surprise party in the world, except the gift was someone's dignity and future. The date was set. 1 week from now, Keanu would bring Robert to the apartment under the pretense of checking out a location for the documentary. And then he'd tell him the truth. He just hoped he could pull it off without breaking down himself, because the more he thought about it, the more emotional he got. This wasn't about him being generous or charitable. This was about recognizing that Robert had never stopped being a person worthy of respect and opportunity. Life had knocked him down, but he'd never stopped getting back up. He'd never stopped trying. All Robert needed was someone to notice, someone to care enough to do something about it. And Keanu had noticed. Now it was time to act. The day had finally come. Keanu barely slept the night before, running through everything in his mind. The apartment was ready, furnished with simple but comfortable pieces. Daniel had handled everything perfectly. The refrigerator was stocked with food. Fresh sheets were on the bed. Towels hung in the bathroom. It looked like a home. Patricia from the community center had the job offer letter ready. Friends had contributed enough money to cover groceries and essentials for months. Everything was in place. Now he just had to get Robert there and tell him. When Robert picked him up that morning, Keanu noticed he seemed more energized than usual. The promise of better pay over the coming weeks had clearly given him something to hope for. He looked like he'd actually slept well for once, even though Keanu knew he'd still spent the night in his car. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," Robert said with a genuine smile. "Where to today?" "Morning, Robert. We're going to check out a location in the West Side, a neighborhood I'm thinking of featuring in the documentary." "Sounds good." They drove through the morning traffic, making small talk about the weather and the latest news. Keanu's heart was pounding the entire time. He kept rehearsing what he'd say in his head, but nothing sounded right. How do you tell someone their life is about to change? They pulled up to a modest apartment complex about 40 minutes later. It was a clean, quiet building in a nice neighborhood. Trees lined the street. There was a small park across the way where kids were playing. "This is it?" Robert asked, looking around. "This is it. Come on. I want to get your opinion on something inside." Robert looked confused but followed Keanu out of the car. They walked up to the second floor and Keanu stopped at apartment 2B. He had the key in his pocket, but his hand was shaking slightly as he pulled it out. "Mr. Reeves, what's going on?" Robert asked, noticing Keanu's nervousness. "Just trust me," Keanu said, unlocking the door. He pushed it open and stepped inside, Robert following behind him. The apartment was perfect. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The living room had a comfortable couch and a small TV. The kitchen was tiny but functional. Everything was simple, but it was clean and warm and felt like home. "It's nice," Robert said, looking around. "Good natural light. Quiet. I think this would work well for your project." Keanu walked to the kitchen table where he'd placed a folder that morning. His hands were still shaking. "Robert, I need to tell you something," he said, turning to face him. "This isn't about the documentary." Robert's expression changed from curious to concerned. "What do you mean?" "I know," Keanu said quietly. "I know about your situation. I know you've been living in your car." The color drained from Robert's face. He took a step back, his hand reaching for the doorframe to steady himself. How did you... I saw you one night. A few weeks ago. After I got home, I saw you park down the street and settle in for the night." Robert closed his eyes and Keanu could see the shame wash over him. His whole body seemed to shrink, like he wanted to disappear. "I'm so sorry," Robert said, his voice barely a whisper. "I should have told you. I should have told the company. I was just trying to keep it together until I could save enough to..." "Stop," Keanu said gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing." Robert opened his eyes, confusion mixing with the shame. "I don't understand." Keanu picked up the folder from the table and held it out. "This apartment is yours, Robert. 6 months of rent, paid in full. The furniture, everything in here, it's all yours." Robert didn't take the folder. He just stared at it like it was something from another world. "What?" "The apartment is yours," Keanu repeated. "And there's more." He opened the folder and pulled out the papers inside. "Patricia Martinez from the Riverside Community Center wants to interview you for a music instructor position. Part-time, but it's real. Here's her number." Robert still wasn't moving, wasn't reaching for the papers. He was just standing there, frozen. "And these," Keanu continued, pulling out several envelopes, "are from people who heard about your situation. They wanted to help. It's enough for groceries, clothes, whatever you need to get settled." "I don't..." Robert started, but his voice broke. "I can't..." "You can," Keanu said firmly. "And you will. Because you've earned it. You've shown up every single day with dignity and professionalism despite everything you were going through. You never complained. You never made excuses. You just kept going." Robert's eyes were filling with tears. "But I didn't do anything special. I was just trying to survive." "That's exactly the point," Keanu said, his own voice getting thick with emotion. "You were just trying to survive, but you did it with such grace. Do you know how rare that is? How many people would have given up or gotten bitter or stopped caring? But not you. You kept your pride. You kept being kind. You kept treating everyone with respect." A tear ran down Robert's cheek. Then another. "I lost everything," he whispered. "My wife, my career, my home, everything. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone." You're not a burden, Keanu said, stepping closer. You're a good man who had bad things happen to him. That's all. And good men deserve good things too. Robert's face crumpled. All the emotions he'd been holding in for months, maybe years, came pouring out. He covered his face with his hands and started to cry. Really cry, deep shaking sobs that came from somewhere so painful that Keanu felt his own eyes burning. Keanu didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and pulled Robert into a hug. The older man collapsed against him, sobbing into Keanu's shoulder. It's okay, Keanu said softly. Let it out. It's okay. I tried so hard, Robert cried. I tried so hard to keep it together. To not let anyone see. To just make it through each day. I know you did. And you made it. You're here now, and you don't have to try so hard anymore. They stood there in that empty living room, in an apartment that would soon be filled with Robert's life and memories. Keanu held him while he cried, while all the pain and fear and exhaustion of the past months came flooding out. After a while, Robert pulled back, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I'm sorry, he said, embarrassed. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize, Keanu said. Please don't apologize for being human. Robert looked around the apartment again like he was seeing it for the first time. His eyes landed on the couch, the kitchen, the doorway to what would be his bedroom. This is really mine? He asked, his voice small and uncertain. It's really yours, for the next 6 months at least, and we'll figure out the rest after that. I don't know how to thank you, Robert said, fresh tears streaming down his face. I don't even know where to start. You don't have to thank me, Keanu said. Just promise me you'll call Patricia about that teaching job. Promise me you'll use this opportunity to build something good. I promise, Robert said immediately. I will. I swear I will. Keanu handed him the folder with all the papers. There's one more thing in here. Keys to the apartment. They're yours. Robert took the folder with trembling hands. He opened it and looked at the keys lying on top of all the other papers. He picked them up slowly, holding them like they were made of gold. I have keys, he said, almost to himself. I have keys to a home. You do. Robert closed his fist around the keys and brought them to his chest. More tears fell, but these were different. These weren't tears of pain or shame. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. Why? Robert asked, looking up at Keanu. Why would you do all this for me? Keanu thought about his answer. He could say a lot of things. He could talk about having the means to help, about how it was the right thing to do. But instead he told the simple truth. Because you reminded me that everyone has a story, Keanu said. Everyone's fighting battles we know nothing about. And sometimes we have the chance to make those battles a little easier. When we have that chance, we should take it. Robert nodded, unable to speak. You've been through hell, Robert. You lost your wife. You lost your career. You lost your home. But you never lost yourself. You never stopped being a good person. That takes strength most people don't have, and that strength deserves to be recognized. I felt so invisible, Robert admitted, like nobody saw me anymore. Like I'd disappeared. I see you, Keanu said. I've seen you this whole time, and you're not invisible. You never were. Robert looked around the apartment one more time, and Keanu could see something changing in his face. The shame was fading. The fear was fading. What was taking their place was something Keanu hadn't seen in Robert's eyes before. It was hope. Real, genuine hope. Can I look around? Robert asked. It's your place, Keanu said with a smile. Look at whatever you want. Robert walked through the apartment slowly, touching things gently like he couldn't quite believe they were real. He opened the refrigerator and saw it was stocked with food. He went into the bedroom and saw the made bed, the dresser, the closet with hangers waiting for clothes. He stood in the bathroom and stared at the shower like it was a miracle. When he came back to the living room, he was smiling through his tears. There's a shower, he said. A real shower. Not a gym bathroom where I have to worry about how long I'm taking. There's a shower, Keanu confirmed, and it's yours to use whenever you want, for as long as you want. Robert laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound. A real, genuine laugh full of joy and relief and disbelief all mixed together. I can't believe this is happening, he said. Believe it, Keanu told him, because it is. Your life is changing today, Robert. Right now. And standing there in that apartment, watching Robert's face transform from someone who was just surviving to someone who could finally live again, Keanu knew that this was one of the best things he'd ever done. 3 days after Robert moved into his apartment, Keanu got a phone call. It was Robert, and his voice sounded different. Lighter somehow. "Mr. Reeves, I got the job," he said, and Keanu could hear the smile through the phone. "Patricia offered me the position. I start next week." "That's fantastic, Robert. I'm so happy for you." "I cried again when she offered it to me," Robert admitted with a laugh. "I seem to be doing a lot of that lately. She said it didn't matter, that it showed I cared." "Can you believe that?" "She said my emotions showed I cared about teaching." "It does," Keanu said, "and you should be proud of that." "I am. I really am." "And Mr. Reeves, thank you for everything. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express what this means." "Just live your life, Robert. That's all the thanks I need." The story could have ended there. Robert had a home, a job, and a fresh start. But word started to spread anyway, the way things do in communities. Other drivers at the company heard that Robert had gotten an apartment. They asked how. He told them humbly about Keanu's kindness. Then someone told someone else, and eventually a local news reporter heard about it. She reached out to Keanu's team asking if the story was true. Keanu didn't want publicity. He never did. But his publicist convinced him that sometimes stories like this needed to be told. Not for his benefit, but because they reminded people that kindness mattered. So Keanu agreed to a brief statement, nothing more. But that statement was enough. Within days, the story was everywhere. Social media exploded with it. People were crying watching the news coverage. They were sharing it, commenting, talking about how it had restored their faith in humanity. But the real impact wasn't in the viral news stories or the social media posts. The real impact was in the small, quiet changes that happened because of it. At Robert's driving company, the management started a fund. They called it the Driver Support Program. It was designed to help drivers who were struggling, who needed assistance but were too proud to ask. Other clients of the company started asking their drivers more questions, really listening to the answers. They started seeing them not just as people who provided a service, but as people with lives and stories and struggles. One driver, a woman named Jennifer, finally admitted she was living in her car with her daughter. Within a week, other clients had pooled money together to help her get an apartment. Another driver, an older man who was struggling to pay for his medications, found that someone had anonymously paid his pharmacy bill for the next 6 months. The ripple effect spread beyond the driving company. People in their own communities started looking around and asking who needed help. Who was struggling silently? Who was too proud to ask for support? A restaurant owner in Robert's new neighborhood read the story and decided to offer free meals to anyone who was homeless. No questions asked, no judgment. A local gym started a program offering free memberships to people who needed a place to shower and get ready for work. A furniture store began donating pieces to people who were trying to get back on their feet. It wasn't solving homelessness or poverty. Those were bigger problems that needed bigger solutions. But it was people remembering to look at each other, to care about each other, to help when they could. For Robert, life became something he hadn't dared to dream about in years. He settled into his apartment, making it his own. He bought a few plants for the windowsill. He hung a picture of his late wife in the bedroom where he could see it every morning. He set up a small keyboard in the corner of the living room, and on quiet evenings, he'd play old songs he'd once taught to his students. The teaching job at the community center turned out to be exactly what he needed. The kids were eager and grateful for the opportunity to learn. They reminded him why he'd become a teacher in the first place. There was one boy, Tommy, who showed up early to every class and stayed late, practicing on the keyboards until his mother came to pick him up. Robert saw himself in that kid, saw that same love for music he'd had at that age. "You're really good," Robert told Tommy one day. "Have you thought about taking this seriously?" Tommy shrugged. "Can't afford private lessons. What if I gave you some extra time after class? Free of charge, just because I think you've got real talent." The boy's face lit up. "Really? You'd do that?" "Someone gave me a chance when I needed it," Robert said. "Feels right to pass it on." Robert kept his driving job too, part-time. He didn't need to anymore, not really. Between the teaching job and the months of paid rent giving him time to save, he could have quit. But he didn't want to. He'd come to love the connections he made with people during drives, the conversations, the brief glimpses into other people's lives. And he still drove for Keanu sometimes. Their relationship had changed, though. It wasn't just driver and client anymore. They'd become friends. Real friends. They'd meet for coffee sometimes, just to talk. No agenda, no formality. Just two people who understood each other. "How are you doing?" Keanu would ask, and Robert always smiled when he answered. "I'm good. Really good. Some days I still can't believe this is my life now." "Believe it," Keanu would say. The same thing he'd told Robert that day in the apartment. 6 months after Robert moved in, his lease was up for renewal. He'd saved enough from both jobs to pay his own rent now. He sat down with Keanu to tell him. "I can pay my own way now," Robert said with pride. "I wanted you to know that. You gave me the foundation and I built on it. I can stand on my own 2 feet." Keanu felt his eyes get misty. "I never doubted you could." "I'm going to pay you back," Robert insisted. "All of it. It might take time, but I will. You don't have to do that. I want to. Not because I feel obligated, but because I want to help someone else the way you helped me. When I pay you back, I want you to use that money to help another person who needs it." "Can you do that?" Keanu nodded, too emotional to speak for a moment. "Yeah," he finally said. "I can do that," and he did. When Robert started paying him back, small amounts every month that he could afford, Keanu put that money aside. He used it to help a single mother who was about to lose her apartment. Then an elderly veteran who couldn't afford his rent and medications. Then a young person aging out of foster care who needed furniture for their first apartment. Robert's story had started a chain reaction that kept going and going. Every person who was helped went on to help someone else when they could. Every act of kindness inspired another. A year after that day in the apartment, Robert called Keanu with news. The community center wanted to expand the music program, and they'd asked him to head it up. Full-time position, better pay, the chance to hire additional instructors and reach even more kids. "I'm going to accept," Robert said, "but I wanted you to be the first to know." "I'm proud of you," Keanu said, and he meant it with his whole heart. "None of this would have happened without you." "No," Keanu corrected gently. "It wouldn't have happened without you. Your strength, your dignity, your refusal to give up even when things were at their worst. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it and built something beautiful." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? That night you saw me sleeping in my car, I'd been thinking it might be time to give up. I was so tired, Keanu. So tired of fighting every day. And then you came along and reminded me that I wasn't invisible, that I mattered. You saved my life. You saved your own life," Keanu said. "You just needed someone to believe in you as much as you used to believe in yourself." Months turned into years. Robert thrived. He bought himself a used car, a nicer one with money he'd saved. He moved to a slightly bigger apartment, still modest but with room for more keyboards and music equipment. His program at the community center became one of the most successful in the city. Kids who'd never dreamed of playing instruments were performing in recitals, some even getting scholarships to study music in college. Tommy, that boy who used to stay late for practice, ended up getting accepted to a prestigious music school with a full scholarship. At his going-away party, he pulled Robert aside. "You changed my life," Tommy said. "I want to come back someday and teach here too. Help kids the way you helped me." Robert hugged him tight. "That would make me really happy." As for Keanu, he didn't talk much about what he'd done. When reporters occasionally asked about Robert's story, he'd give simple answers. "I just helped a friend," he'd say. Anyone would have done the same, but that wasn't quite true, and everyone knew it. Not everyone would have noticed. Not everyone would have cared. Not everyone would have taken the time to help in a way that preserved dignity while providing support. One evening, a few years after everything had happened, Keanu and Robert sat on a bench in that little park across from Robert's apartment building. Kids were playing, their laughter filling the air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Do you ever think about that night?" Robert asked. "The night you saw me in the car?" "Sometimes," Keanu admitted. "What do you think about?" Keanu was quiet for a moment, watching the kids play. "I think about how close I came to just going inside my house and never knowing. How easy it would have been to not see, to not care, to assume everything was fine." "But you did see. You did care." "Yeah," Keanu said, "and my life is better for it." That's what people don't understand about helping others. They think it's this selfless thing, this sacrifice. But the truth is, it enriches your own life too. You've enriched mine, Robert. Your friendship, your story, your strength. It's changed me. Robert smiled. We changed each other then. We did. They sat in comfortable silence watching the world go by. Robert thought about where he'd been, sleeping in a car, feeling invisible and forgotten, and where he was now with a home, a job he loved, a purpose. I'm happy, Robert said suddenly. I didn't think I'd ever be able to say that again. But I am. I'm genuinely happy. Good, Keanu said. You deserve to be. So do you. They watched as the streetlights began to flicker on one by one, pushing back the growing darkness. And Robert thought about how sometimes life gave you a streetlight when you were lost in the dark. Sometimes it came in the form of an apartment or a job or a second chance. And sometimes it came in the form of another person who saw you, really saw you, and decided you were worth the effort. Keanu had been Robert's streetlight. And in helping Robert find his way, Keanu had found something too. A reminder that we're all just people, doing our best, deserving of dignity and kindness and hope. A reminder that the smallest act of attention, of caring, of compassion could change everything. As they stood up to leave, Robert turned to Keanu one more time. Thank you, he said. Not just for the apartment or the help with the job. Thank you for seeing me. Always, Keanu replied. Always. And in that simple exchange was everything. Two people, from different worlds, connected by a moment of compassion that had grown into a lifelong friendship. Proof that when we look at each other with open hearts, when we recognize the humanity in everyone we meet, we can change lives, including our own.